Good evening, everyone. This is Tala with Drive-thru Therapy. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight on another episode. And as always, I'm grateful for your support. Thank you guys so much for all the emails that you guys continue to send, letting me know where you're at. I'm always honored and privileged to receive those emails. And I hope that I give you some encouragement. So allow me to do so. All right. I wanted to tonight talk about couples communication. My favorite thing to work on, actually the most important for me to work on, is the individual journey, because that is where everything else stems from. We all come with baggage. We all come with ways that we've learned to do things, programming, if you will. And this impacts the way we bond. To work with couples without having to do the individual therapy is not for me. I've figured out not as useful, because the couple have a lot more things individually to address that came about way before they bonded with their partner. So to understand themselves better and how they got to where they've gotten, they have to do the individual work. But I do reserve a special place, special times for couples intervention. Usually I have worked with one or both of the individuals in a couples session individually. So that's the thing I usually recommend. Couples therapy is wonderful. It's wonderful. I actually get people when it's time for intervention. I know it's a little bit too late, but that's when I like to get, usually that's when they come to me. So I've kind of realized to go with the flow, because people will not come in for preventative work or the individual therapy. They'll wait till a crisis occurs, and then they'll go into treatment, which is by then probably a bit too late, because we can't undo or unsay the things we've done and said. So we want to make sure that we go to do our individual work first. And then if we want to integrate couples therapy, I think that would be the healthiest approach, in my opinion. That's not shared by everybody, but it's, in my opinion, I think is the most important here. You as an individual is in everything that you do. And you've learned many, many things before you started bonding with that partner. So they're not necessarily to blame for all our responses, even though I would like to think so. They're not. We gotta do a little more self-discovery and self-understanding to kind of expose some beliefs and ideas that we have from our past that impact us today. And that's what this podcast is really about. It's about self-exploration and self-transformation. And we can't do that work without the individual taking responsibility for themselves. So I hope that kind of helps you understand a little bit what I mean by couples therapy and when I mean it to be useful. And this is just my opinion. If you were to choose from couples therapy or individual therapy and you only could do one, I would really recommend you do individual therapy first. That is your biggest bang for the buck. Okay. I've given my 2 cents in this. Now let's get started. The most important thing today we're going to talk about is couples communication. The patterns that I find that are really hard to fix, but that cause the biggest problems. Now, if you're listening to this, trying to start a relationship, this is very useful for you. So this way you can prevent all the stuff that I'm going to talk about today. You can prevent it from happening. You can practice that self-control and understanding and prevent it from happening. The second thing is to also allow for people that are already in a relationship demonstrating these really aggressive patterns of communication, distrusting patterns, or what I call protective patterns in communication. If you're already demonstrating these, hopefully we can help you start to do the work to get healthy. I want to make sure everybody knows before we start anything and talk about anything else is that for couples, if you are going to start doing the work on getting healthy in your ability to communicate, I want it to be happening from the inside out. Most people, most couples, when they come in, I give them strategies, and they go back and to their home and they try these out. They come back and tell me, Tala, that didn't work. And the second that my partner did this, I started to talk back, or I approached him this way, or whatever the case is. And at that point, it's kind of like the idea is being presented here is that if I'll change, but it is contingent on the response of my partner. Now, this is too easy. This does not imply change, friends. Change means change. If I want to become healthy, right? Not just for this relationship, but for any relationship that I choose to have, I want to do it from the inside out, meaning that it is not contingent on the responses of others. I will not fluctuate with them. I want to make sure that everybody knows if you are waiting for the partner to respond to you beautifully because you responded, in a very magical way, this is too easy. This is too easy. This is not change. This is almost like I'm trying to do my old tactics of I'll be nice, but I'm going to get something back out of it. And when I don't get something back out of it, I will throw this tantrum. We want to stop this pattern altogether. That's the first thing I want people to be aware of, is that your change is not contingent on the other person. If you want to change and get healthy, you're going to get healthy for you. What's really important about this too, and useful, is that when you start getting healthy and it is not contingent on the other person's response, you are helping them work towards something, right? You are at a different level, helping them work towards to that healthy level. However, if you are tit and tat with them, right? Then you're both at the same energetic level. You're going back and forth, and it's a cycle. I'll change if you change, but you don't change, I don't change. And we maintain this protective stance. I hope this is clear for everybody. Change means change. If you're going to change and you're going to make this commitment as an individual first, this cannot be contingent on another person's response. And it's helpful because eventually it'll make them hopefully either work towards you and match your energetic, healthy level, or it will tell them, I don't find this useful for me and I can't get what I want from it. And so I might leave. And we don't want to take this risk sometimes that if I change, it might actually change the whole dynamic. In fact, it will. And we don't know what it's going to change into, but people are too afraid to find out. But it's so worth it. I just want to tell you from here on out, just to keep it in your mind, as it is worth the change. It's worth discovering whether this relationship is capable of becoming healthy or not. But we can't give it a shot unless we do our best to maintain this healthy energetic level, healthy response with consistency, as consistent as we can make it. I'm not talking about perfection, but I'm talking about responsibility taking and consistency. Okay. That has to be said before I even talk about any of the other patterns that I'm going to talk about that are kind of negative patterns in communication that we're going to identify, and then we're going to help with working on how to change those things. But this cannot be done without you making the commitment to become healthy. You cannot take charge of somebody else's healthy communication. You're only in charge of yours, right? And we also cannot tell them to change unless I myself change. I cannot tell anybody to change unless I myself demonstrate that change. It's hard to change people. It's really hard. So, I gotta focus on myself changing, and whether they come for the ride or not, that's the gift that you get to, reveal for yourself eventually. And you're worth finding out about this gift and the truth, whether they're going to match you or they're going to bow out. Either way, it is a gift to you. Now, before I start talking about the patterns of communication that we need to address, one of the most important things I want people to remember is that we are all born for connection. All of us are. We are born to connect. We get a sense of warmth from it, chemically speaking, even hormonally speaking. We get a sense of warmth from it. Now, when this child who's born for connection begins to experience trauma with their environment, which means neglect experienced by the person that's supposed to be taking care of them or the people that are supposed to be taking care of them, when their ability to attach to them becomes wobbly or insecure, right? The conditions are being placed. There's violation of physical as well as emotional boundaries. A lot of the time, this child will become protective in their ability to bond. Because of this very significant disappointment early on, it forces this child to not find safety in bonding. For whatever reason they've experienced, whatever they've determined based on what happened to them in their environment, they've determined that bonding for me or being vulnerable is not safe. This changes this kiddo now, where they are wanting to be connective. They become protective. Now, as an adult, their protection continues to develop and manifest into early adulthood and on. The way they start to bond is usually based or come from a protective nature. It might be really good at first, right? And you'll see it to extremes where this person either wants to be saved or avoids intimacy altogether. That's the protective individual, right? They have too many rules, too many conditions, and they just kind of either force the partner to kind of save them emotionally, or the other extreme, which is also protective, which is I want to avoid intimacy and vulnerability and investment in a relationship emotionally because I don't want to get hurt. So either way, it's a protection. I either go for over control, right, where I cling really hard, or I avoid. That is the response of people that have experienced this level of insecurity in their ability to bond. They just can't handle it, right? And if they have to bond, it gets clingy. Or I completely avoid it altogether and I get emotionally detached. This is important before I talk about anything else. Because let's say you marry somebody who's in a protective mode. And let's say you are thinking that you're not in a protective mode. Almost always, something on your end is an energetic match to them. So we can't say my husband is protective and me not saying that there's something going on with me to accept this level of detachment from a person or this level of control from a person. I'm inviting it into my life. I'm accepting it. So I need to take responsibility as an individual for doing my part. What's going on with me? What's going on with my vulnerability? Whether I overgive but ask for very little, or I give nothing at all. So a protective person going into a relationship is going to demonstrate some significant responses, and they may not be, they just may not be normalized. They're normalized between two people in that relationship. At one point, it's familiar to them to protect themselves in love. When I am with a partner, they're on the same team. We are on the same team. We are seeing one another without limitations. We already are fulfilled on the inside. So when we match up with another person, it's just a compliment to what we already have. They are not a source of it. They are not the source of our self-esteem. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So when we get into a relationship and we're protective, we're both bonding insecurely, might be really lustful, great at first, as it usually is, right? You're going to save me. I'm going to save you. I'm going to fix you. You're going to fix me. And then eventually, we justify people's behavior. We don't see red flags when we need to. And because we also have some self-esteem, possibly trauma in the background, we don't see things as abnormal. We see them as normal. So we could see chaos, we could see protection, or lack of vulnerability or detachment or too much clinginess as normalized in our psyche. We want those things, basically. We don't mind them. We don't think they're a problem yet. So we bond early on based on those conditions. And then eventually, people know or realize they cannot fix the other person. Where first we justified some of their behaviors, now those same behaviors that we thought we could fix, that they thought they would change, that we made excuses for them, now those are the things that really bother us, and they are biting us in the rear when it comes to our couple interaction. So by the time they get to me, it is an intervention. It is like, this relationship is not working, and we're just gonna let it go. We're just gonna let it go. This is our last attempt to stay together. At that point, they've already put up or posted so many protective habits towards each other that vulnerability, right, and communication is really not a safe thing to do in that relationship. It's almost withheld. Vulnerability becomes withheld in the couple's communication as a way to control, right? I'm not going to be weaker than you. Now we're going to talk about those protective habits that we have in a relationship, that if you have those, basically we've gone too far. We need to stop right where we're at and start taking responsibility for ourselves. Most people want to change, or most couples specifically want to change each other. If you change, I'll change. I need that to stop right now. I'm only responsible for myself. Like I said from the beginning, we want to keep this in the background as you are listening to what I'm saying about those next habits of negative, or more likely protective patterns of communication that cause couples to reduce the space for vulnerability and for love and for affection and for partnership. The things that we want in a relationship, we reduce the space for them when we are protective with one another. We reduce the space. Where at the beginning, the space is really large. As we continue to protect ourselves and protect ourselves and protect ourselves in the relationship, the communication and the vulnerability becomes so small. And now we're like trying to force it open. And we even tell our partner, you need to open up. You need to talk about this right now. You need to address this right now. You need to communicate with me. And we're forcing the hell out of them to get more vulnerable, not realizing that, listen, do I, as an individual in this couple, do I provide this space to reduce the protective responses from this person? Or do I protect right back? Ask yourself this and answer it truthfully to yourself, so you'll have a better chance of changing it. If you continue to justify your own responses, your own protective responses in the relationship, more than likely you're not going to change anything, because it's like, I have a good reason why I responded the way I responded, and they deserved it, and they do the same thing, and that's why I don't change. What? Like, we don't want to, if you're doing all that, you're not going to change. Nothing's going to change, and it's just going to keep getting worse. And the vulnerability, the space for vulnerability, partnership, love gets squeezed tighter and smaller until it's just squeezed the heck out. It's just snuffed out of the relationship. I've seen it happen so many times. So you deserve an opportunity to change this and find out what this relationship can do if I got healthy. That's it. If I just got healthy, I got healthy. Not the other person, just me. I'm in charge of myself in this dynamic. I'm not in charge of changing them or controlling their responses. That's what got me in trouble anyways. That's what's protective anyways. So the first pattern that I want couples to change is really a prideful one, which is the strong need to be right. Now, this is an obvious one. Tala, why are you mentioning this? Obviously, everybody does this, right? This is the most detrimental pattern of communication in a relationship, but it's worth talking about. When I have a strong need to be right, what happens is that I want you to imagine it, visualize it. When I have a strong need to be right, I'm convincing the other person. I'm not allowing their opinion to come out safely, right? And I'm judging it, and I'm trying to convince them otherwise, or I'm trying to protect myself and not take responsibility. And I just gotta be right. I gotta be right no matter what it is, right? And I'll do the funny things in order for me to make sure that I'm right. When we're doing that, again, I want you to visualize it. You're squeezing the space between you and your partner. When it comes to communication and vulnerability, you're squeezing it tighter. You're closing it up. You can't undo it in this point, right? We can't undo that part right away once we do it. It takes a little bit. That's what we're going to be working on, is fixing this pattern of needing to be right. This is an obvious one. If we just do that one, and it will lift the heavy load off the negative pattern in that relationship, as well as the burden in that relationship. Will lift it right up. So let's do that. Let's take responsibility for our part. If I am wrong about something, or if I see that the other person is really not going to be convinced, that's okay. I'd rather be, this is where we step in, I'd rather be happy than right. I'd rather be peaceful than right. Choose your peace at this time. And nobody has to be right or wrong. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you very much, partner. I appreciate your feedback. I will definitely consider it. And that's it. Really. I need us to start talking to each other this way. because we suck the romance out of it when it becomes a competition. It becomes a competition. Who's right, who's wrong. This is terrible. This is really terrible pattern here of communicating with one another. So I wanted to mention that as the first one, which leads me when it comes to competition. It's the second one. The pattern of competing emotionally. When a couple competes emotionally of whose emotions are the most important, this is very protective. Maybe this individual may have had some issues growing up being heard, or feels like they're not as important. And so when they get into a relationship and they're loved, the person gives them a lot of attention, gives them a lot of love, and they become emotionally fulfilled in that. That becomes a source of like a big, large source of fulfillment. However, the partner who's taken this job to fix them and be all these things to them has eventually became burdened by the ability to fix their self-esteem or not, because they would have to remove their own feelings in order for them to prioritize the feeling of their partner. Now, this is where I also see something that happens every now and then, where the partner uses their emotions to control the other person or to control the household, where they say, I'm depressed. And then they do very self-destructive, hurtful patterns because they're feeling depressed or anxious. They make decisions outside of them towards people that are not that kind. We want to make sure we stop this pattern. This couple tends to be very irritable because it's a competition now of whose emotions are more important, whose emotional needs are more important. So they are going to compete, like who's angrier, who's more tired of work, who's going to complain more. And they're irritable. They just are in protective mode. They have to stay this way because they're wanting to make sure that they don't continue to have to prioritize other person's emotions, but they don't know how to make that boundary. So they start getting they start using the same tactic to emotionally control in the relationship, right? So I'm going to make my emotions louder so I can make sure you feel guilty, you feel whatever, so you can back off. I hope you're getting what I'm saying. This one is a very destructive and negative communication pattern of who's more irritable in the relationship. Unfortunately, the kids see this, and the kids are in between this. They come home from school. The parents come home. The kids are waiting for them. The parents come home and it's like a competition and they're in the middle of it. Who's angrier? They start becoming irritable about the dishes aren't washed. The rooms aren't cleaned, and they're overreacting and they're yelling, and it's terrible. It's a terrible household environment, right? All protective, because I'm not meeting my own emotional needs at that point. I'm asking, and I've relied on the other person to meet my emotional needs. Now, when the other person starts to figure out that I have my own emotional needs, I don't want to take care of yours, we are panicking. We start to make it even louder. Now the person becomes also protective and competitive and makes their emotions even louder. So we're left again with a couple that's very irritable, a couple that's competitive. It turns into a standoff. It's terrible. Just terrible. We want to clean this one up. That one is my responsibility. I don't want anybody to take care of my emotional well-being anymore. I want to be able, since I am the source of the hormonal production for my good feelings anyways, they're not injecting me. I am going to take responsibility for it. They're not injecting me with any emotional responses. I am the one who's producing them. So I can produce love if I want to. Joy, peace, happiness. I can produce all those things if I want to where I'm standing, but I've been relying on them for so long. So when I have a bad day, they get to be blamed for it. And so they don't want to be blamed for it anymore. They become protective, and then they start to fight back by making their emotions even louder. So it's just really turns ugly. Let's just stop this now. We're going to take responsibility for ourselves, like I said. And I am not going to use my emotions to manipulate another person. I need to check my motive, why I'm telling this person about my emotions, and, what do I want to accomplish with that? What am I relying on them to do? And I'm going to get disappointed, and it's going to be just not that kind. Not that kind at all. So this pattern is pretty important to identify, this emotional competitiveness that results in a couple. Okay, so far we talked about the need to be right and then the emotional competitiveness. But before I get into the next pattern of communication that's protective, I want to make sure everybody knows when I mean protective, I do mean self-preserving. So you've got two people in a relationship that now are thinking the other person will not emotionally be there. So I got to take care of myself. So this I got to take care of myself, whether it results in my need to control my partner so I can get what I want, or to avoid them altogether so I don't get hurt. Those responses are considered self-preservation. But this comes from an old wound. This comes from because I did not get my emotional needs met growing up, that I just turned into a self-preserving individual where I just have to meet, I meet my own emotional needs. I don't pick people that are a good match for me, a healthy match. I usually pick people from this place of protection, that's within me, that self-preservation. So just keep that in mind. You've got two people that instead of beautifully creating a partnership and growing together, they're now trying to meet their emotional needs and self-preserve because I know that the other person is not looking out for me. I got to look out for myself. This is just, oh man, if the couple has gotten this far, friends, just halt and just reflect. Do your individual reflection of what you would like to do as an individual. And hopefully we can talk to the other person and figure out what's going on here. But it starts with me taking my responsibility for my past. That's what that means. I just got to take responsibility for my past and what made me self-preserving or protective. Because I cannot keep blaming the other person for my self-preservation. Okay? I can't keep doing it. This other person was protective, sure. But that also made me protective, sure. But because I already had it in me, right? I chose this partner to be protective with. I got to take responsibility of healing it. I don't have to leave the relationship to do it. I can start getting healthy in the relationship. I just want to make sure that I add this idea of self-preservation so this way you know where you're at when you're dealing with yourself in regards to this protective communication pattern. So the next communication pattern I want people to work on that's going to have a negative outcome is using the other person as a source of my self-esteem. Early on in relationships, we connect with people. Sometimes if we haven't done our inner work, we connect with people based on, again, this protective, trauma-based background. We're not in the healing process yet or self-awareness process yet. So we're going to bond with them based on this trauma that I've experienced. And usually it's a quick, lusty need for validation in the beginning, right? It's you fulfill me and you meet my needs and I'll meet your needs. I'll save you, you'll save me. And I've relied to some extent on this individual to save me. Now, if it's really great in the beginning like that, usually it's people in the relationship talking about how I was done wrong in the past. And they even tell the partner, they're like, oh yes, my ex cheated on me. He or she lied to me. And we throw it at them and we ask them to save me from that. Be different, right? Be different. And the truth of the matter is we don't need to tell them that. The person is allowed to be whatever they want to be, and you're allowed to see it. You don't have to give them a heads up. But unfortunately, early on in the relationship, we throw this information at them from the past. I was cheated on. It hurt me and I don't want this to happen to me again. Please make sure it doesn't happen to me again. And we make them to some extent in the beginning in charge of saving us. Now, the other person is going to be flattered, especially if they come also from a past of, needing validation. So this is going to make them feel great that they're needed and wanted and I can really save you. I can really have control over this outcome. So the person takes this on themselves to be in charge of their partner's self-esteem. I'm going to save you. I'm going to be the person that changes your mind. And then they bond based on this nonsense. This is terrible. This is terrible trauma bond that I was hurt and you're going to heal me. And the individual that's wanting to be saved is going to rely on this other individual that wants to feel good for saving someone. At first, this is sexy. However, it eventually becomes a burden. it becomes a really large burden to carry because the couple, they have one person continuing to measure their value, their self-esteem, from the source they've been relying on, which is their partner. And when the partner doesn't perform, then they feel not valuable, not lovable. Now, they don't know that this is a deeper wound than their partner can actually fill. There's no way that this partner can fill this or heal this wound or fill this void up. There's no way this can be done by one person. The only person that can do it is, myself. That I can fill my own void. I can heal myself. I'm in charge of my self-esteem as I produce the hormones anyways. The other person is not in charge of that. However, I've been relying on them as the source of my self-esteem. So everything they do or not do, I use to give myself a grade about whether I'm lovable in that moment or not. So when they don't take out the trash, I say shit like, they don't care about me anymore. They don't think I'm important enough. Anything. I could use any of what they're saying. So taking out the trash becomes a measuring tool to measure my worth. And so I will make sure that the person knows, whether it's through my silent treatment, whatever the case is, right? Or my overreaction. I'm going to tell them that you don't care about me. That's why you don't take out the trash. And they're like, it's just, it's just not important. In our mind, we can't conceive that they don't find it a priority, whatever you find a priority to be. Like we cannot conceive that, right? That the trash taking, the trash throwing is not a priority to them like it is to me. And it doesn't mean that much. So we cannot conceive that. We are so self-involved that we actually think that the other person should already know that if you take out the trash, you prove to me I'm lovable. And because you don't take out the trash, you know what you're doing. You're telling me I'm not important. And then we keep telling them that they're not good enough. We keep giving them a grade and myself a grade based on their responses. And it's constantly feeling like that person that's being used as a measuring tool is going to constantly feel like they're not enough in that relationship. They're not enough. They're going to just eventually give up. Their self-esteem drops because no matter what I do, my wife isn't happy or my husband isn't happy or my partner isn't happy. And they're going to eventually just think they're just not good enough. I don't feel happy in this relationship. That's what's going to happen. So I want people to be aware of that. The other person is not the source of my self-esteem. They have to be free. They gotta be free. So simple stuff like taking out the trash or not doing the dishes is not going to mean that I'm not lovable and I'm not important. Those are wounds that are way bigger than this person can ever fix. Those are my wounds. However, how it started in the beginning, they wanted to save me. They had that need to save me, but the whole thing is just a mistake and let's fix it now. Let's fix it now. And I'm going to take responsibility for my self-esteem. So this person is not used in any way for them as a source of my value. They are not going to be used to give myself a grade for how important I am, how lovable I am, how worthy I am. They do not tell me that. They do not tell me that. They cannot give me that. So I need to stop relying on them and I need to set them free. And when they are free, I am free. This relationship then becomes a lot lighter. The communication becomes a lot lighter. People are less protective because they're not sitting on pins and needles or on eggshells, walking on eggshells. If I don't take out the trash, I don't even know what to expect, because if I come home and if something is not done, my partner is going to lash out at me because I just didn't find whatever it is that they found important. So that partner is usually almost like emotionally abused because they're walking on eggshells. They're like, I can't make her or can't make him happy. And no matter what I do, they're never happy. They're just going to keep using the same habit of looking at things around and using that to measure their importance, their lovability level. And the partner feels like they are helpless. They're not able to control that. And they don't know when it's coming. They don't know when the partner's displeasure or disapproval is coming. So this eventually turns sour. People start to even become more protective or avoidant as a way to solve this problem. Yeah. And resentment is built. It's just terrible. So if I'm working on this on myself, like let's say I'm the partner who is using another person to measure my value, I'm going to stop this and I'm just going to stop doing the funny things that I do to measure. And I'm going to stop initiating fights, because at this point I could also initiate fights so I could see if that person still loves me. This is a pattern of communication that should be separated, but I'm just going to mention it as part of this pattern of communication, is that when I initiate a fight, in order for me to get some sort of response back, right? Emotionally, I'm going to keep starting fights as a way to measure whether this person loves me or finds me important, because I can't control anything else, but I can control whether I can push their buttons and make them mad, right? So at that point, that's when I feel or experience love. This is a trauma response. We need to do individual work on this one in particular. This is not healthy at all, obviously. So I need to stop and check my motives. Why I'm going to start a fight right now, or even do I really even need to talk about this right now with this person? Is it coming from a place or a motive that's not that kind, that I just want to seek reassurance? I want to meet my own emotional needs. And while I'm meeting my emotional needs, I will hurt them, not caring whether I hurt them or not. Right? So it could be something so simple like the fight about taking the trash out. It's kind of like I'll hold on to it and then later I'll, bring it up in a way where they emotionally start responding to me, because I'll blame them or accuse them of something. And I know darn well I'm doing it. I know it's just going to turn into a fight, but I don't mind at this point that it turns into a fight. At least I get some sort of response, which I perceive that I'm important. It fulfills my need for importance at this point. I'm using them to fulfill my need for importance. However, it's destroying the relationship altogether. It's destroying the trust between two people altogether. Because I'm not looking out for you. I'm not withholding or using self-control. I'm starting fights with you in order to meet my own needs. I don't care how this hurts you or doesn't hurt you. I don't care what you're going to think later. I just want to control my lovability right now. And I don't feel lovable, so I'm going to start a fight with you so I can get something out of it. Okay. Also, be careful with that. I just wanted to mention that, even though that should have been a separate one, but they all go together anyways. Okay. The final pattern that I'm going to talk about today, even though I could talk about so many more, but I'm just going to do this. This might be a part 1, it might be a part 2 to this, but for now, you can just work on these things we're talking about here. So this pattern or protective pattern of communication is probably very common, which is on either extreme of a response. One is I avoid complete conflict. Like I just try to make my partner happy just so I can avoid conflict. And on the other extreme, where I over confront, like I want an answer now. I want to fix everything now and everything on my term now. And I might even chase my partner to another part of the room when they're trying to get away. Like that's that person. Okay. So if either extreme is happening, whether I'm avoiding to make the other person happy or to over confront so I could solve this right now, either one of those creates lack of trust between both people in communication. At that point, I feel like I'm not being heard. At that point, we reduce the amount of topics we can actually talk about without causing problems, without causing fights. Like we know now that we can't talk about certain things as partners, which is terrible. What's the point of having a relationship where I just don't get the benefits of a relationship from it? Does that make sense? It's kind of, I've got two people policing themselves, policing each other, and they're in a relationship, but they get no benefits at all from it. You're sleeping next to a person, you're waking up next to a person that you can bond with and enjoy and have a cup of coffee with and have conversations with and talk about everything with. I mean, look at this. You could just be at this level of fantastic, greatness, but we're choosing to police one another. It's just self-preservation mode here, protective mode. Yeah. So I want us to make sure that when we're about to either avoid a conflict because I'm afraid to talk about things, I'm afraid to place boundaries, I'm afraid to ask for my wants and needs in a relationship, that's a problem. that's a problem. It's already a huge trust issue here because I know I'm not going to be heard. It's going to be used against me. I'm going to withhold information because I know I got to protect myself because eventually the other person is going to use something against me or whatever the case is. And on the other extreme, if I'm the person that has to solve it right now, right, and I just can't handle it, this is all about meeting my needs. I'm not interested in the other person at all and their feelings and what's happening with them. I am just solely wanting to solve the problem now. I want to control something now. Again, either extreme is protective and it comes from past trauma, ways we've learned to protect ourselves from vulnerability and hurt and pain. We don't want to bring those into a relationship because again, it ruins what a relationship can really do. You know, you have your best friend with you. You sleep next to them. You have slumber parties with them. You wake up and you have fun with them and have coffee. You have somebody to have your breakfast with, to share information with, to enjoy. When we become controlling or control factors or conditions, even by avoiding, it's a form of control. So I don't want to rock the boat. That's a form of controlling a response. Anytime we control the response of another person in order for us to keep a relationship, yeah, we're keeping it, but what's the price we have to pay to keep it, right? It's not a relationship anymore. It's all about just protective responses. I have a physical body there, but I get no benefit out of it emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, whatever you want at this point. There's no connection there. There's only protection. Okay? So refrain from doing either extreme. Learn to open up the space of communication here by being the best listener you can ever be. If you want to know what a good listener is, you could just Google the hell out of it. Just Google it and it'll pop up what a good listener is. Take whatever that resonates with you and start applying it. All this information doesn't do much. You can intellectually know this. Like, yes, I know it. Until you start applying it, none of this will work. Okay. So just because I know information, I read books, I listen to podcasts. If I don't do the work, I am not changing. When people tell me, Tala, I already know, I'm like, apply it, please. Just start applying it. Why are we not applying it? That's when we're going to start to see change. When we start applying it and going through that discomfort and taking those proper emotional risks to grow, to mature, instead of over controlling or completely removing our need to make decisions and avoid altogether. I don't need to respond in either way. I want to make sure that we open the space for non-judgment. We open the space for things can be said and we'll be okay. It'll be fine. It's not the end of the world. The person's allowed to have their own thoughts and feelings, and I'm allowed to have my own thoughts and feelings, and that needs to stay there as the basic premise. So to allow for a larger space for us to communicate. In the beginning of any relationship, that space is there. It is there. We want to impress the other person, so we are great listeners. But somewhere along the way, when we start to invest in them, the space for how much we allow, because we're so afraid to connect. This is when our protective side comes up, is when we start to love them and we start to fear them leaving. So now we get controlling. And the space for communication becomes smaller and smaller and smaller because our need to control the outcome here, because we don't want anything to change. We don't want them to leave. We start doing all this stuff that doesn't provide freedom in the relationship. It does the opposite. So our need to control here, whether it's through people pleasing or through giving everything away, is gonna hurt. Eventually, it's going to turn sour. It's not sustainable, as all extremes are not sustainable. Okay. All right. I hope this helps you along the way. I want you to know that this can be changed, but I can't guarantee that the person that you're with is going to match you. When you start becoming healthy, this may not. And I need you to be ready for this. This may not match the other person's response to you because they're still trauma bonding. They still want to be fixed and want to be saved, want to use protective factors. And they're not sold or convinced that there's another way to do it. They're not convinced that vulnerability can be safe, that love is safe. They're still not wanting to do that. The most important thing is you working on yourself and you're becoming healthy. You have somewhere where this partner can go to become. You're setting the tone for that relationship. But let's say they're not willing to come along for the ride. That's okay. I need you to just humble yourself, as we all have done it. Humble yourself and allow them to leave. Allow them to find whatever they're looking for until they realize eventually that it's not working anymore. I need you to find and to get the love you truly deserve, but you have to be the standard, the source of love that you deserve first. You have to be the source of love that you deserve first. So this way, when a person comes in and gives you less than that, you'll notice it. You will not make it better than it is. But if you are starving on the inside and you don't think you're the source of love and you don't think love comes from within you, you're not lovable, you're not worthy, then any old schmo can come right in front of you and give you a few words and show some kind of kindness. Doesn't even have to be great. Because you're starving, you're going to reach out and feed yourself with that. So if we've done that before, if we've trauma bonded before, we can heal this on our own, in ourselves, not necessarily as a couple yet. You do your work. Eventually, it'll either help the other person or it'll help the other person. Either way, you're going to need to find out what the outcome is. And it's a gift to you. I hope that makes sense. I'm repeating a lot of it today, but please understand that when I repeat it, your brain loves it. And at the same time, it finds it annoying, but you'll remember it. So I'm doing it for your health and well-being. Trust me. Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I'm sending you love and light. And remember, the ultimate act of true love is to save another person from my anger and what I can do with it. This has been an episode of Drive-thru.